Okay, so let's dive into a topic that's, well, pretty complex and definitely controversial. What does it actually take to become a billionaire? Is it really just a story of pure genius and hard work, or is there a moral price to pay for a 10-figure fortune? You know the story we always hear, right? It's the classic tale of the heroic, self-made entrepreneur. This quote, which was cited in an Oxfam report, just captures that idea perfectly. They're just ordinary men and women who have achieved incredible success through hard work, determination, luck, and risk. And this narrative, it paints this picture of these incredible innovators who create jobs, they drive progress, and their massive wealth, well, it's just the fair reward for their one-of-a-kind talent and effort. You know, the meritocratic hero. But is the path to $1 billion really that simple? The reality, as we're about to see, is way more complex. It's a mix of psychology, powerful economic systems, and a whole series of ethical compromises that we're going to unpack right now. Let's start with what happens to the human mind when it starts to accumulate extreme wealth. It's a really fascinating and, frankly, according to the research, a kind of troubling transformation. And this brings us to this idea of the empathy gap. Now, this isn't about people being born bad or anything like that. Instead, the research suggests it's more of an adaptive response. As your wealth and your independence grow, your need to rely on other people shrinks, and along with it, your capacity for empathy and altruism can start to fade. This quote just nails the core idea from a report on hyper-accumulation. Think about it. When you don't need to rely on your community for survival, for a loan, for help with childcare, for support, your brain can actually become less skilled at tuning into their emotions and their needs. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. There are multiple studies that show a real correlation between a higher socioeconomic status and behaviors like increased lying, cheating, even little things like more frequent traffic violations. And there's also this tendency for the wealthy to see their success as being all about their own personal merit, completely overlooking systemic advantages or just plain old luck. It suggests the very process of getting rich might chip away at our natural impulse to be fair. So, how does this psychological shift actually play out in the real world? Okay, let's switch gears and look at the actual paths people take to become billionaires. How are these massive fortunes really made? An Oxfam report gives us this really useful way to think about it, a framework they call the ladder of demerit. And it's designed to break down the different sources of extreme wealth and ask the tough question, how much merit is actually involved here? So the ladder sorts these sources of wealth. At the top, you have the stuff that's clearly not based on merit, things like crime or cronyism, which is basically getting special favors from the government. Then you move down to the more debatable rungs. Inheritance, for example. That's just luck, right? Not effort. And even the wealth that comes from monopolies or technology, it's argued that it rewards individuals way beyond what their own talent could ever justify. This number is just staggering. Based on Oxfam's analysis, at least half of all the billionaire wealth in the world is clearly non-meritocratic. It comes directly from inheritance or from industries that are just riddled with cronyism. This one statistic really throws a wrench in that whole self-made story we started with. Okay, so beyond the individual paths, there are these incredibly powerful economic systems that don't just allow this to happen, but actively enable and protect these massive fortunes. It's not just about the player you see, it's about the rules of the game itself. The ideal story, the one we love to tell, is that wealth is created by one person's lone genius. But the sources we're looking at argue that nobody becomes a billionaire alone. That level of wealth absolutely requires a system that's built on the collective labor of thousands of people, often through things like keeping wages low to maximize the profits that flow all the way to the very top. And these are the levers that get pulled to make it happen. We're talking about the structural features of our global economy, systematically keeping wages down, using these incredibly complex schemes to avoid paying taxes, and lobbying governments to write rules that favor capital over labor. This even includes wild strategies like buy, borrow, die, where the ultra-wealthy can borrow against their assets and then pass that wealth on completely tax-free when they die. This table just lays it all out, perfectly capturing the massive gap between the story we're told and the actual reality. The ideal? Billionaires are meritocratic, they pay their fair share of taxes, and they give back selflessly. But the empirical reality, the data-driven truth, shows that luck is often the biggest factor, effective tax rates can be shockingly close to 1%, and a lot of philanthropy can be used for reputation washing and, you guessed it, tax avoidance. So when you put all of these pieces together, the psychological changes, the personal paths to wealth, and all the systemic cheat codes, a much more complicated and honestly uncomfortable picture starts to form. So the path to becoming a billionaire starts to look less like a simple story of hard work and a lot more like a complex equation. An equation that has a huge dose of luck, a ton of systemic advantages, those psychological shifts that reduce empathy, and a whole series of, let's call them, ethical compromises. The argument here is that this moral corruption isn't some accident. It's a built-in feature needed to get and keep that level of wealth. And that leaves us with the ultimate question. It isn't just about judging the morality of any one person. It's really about questioning the architecture of the game itself. If accumulating this kind of extreme wealth requires these compromises, adult sense of empathy, and the exploitation of systemic loopholes, then what does that say about the economic systems that not only allow it to happen, but actually celebrate it?